Or whatever you want to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the class on sales strategy. Today, we actually have a very interesting guest speaker. We have Mr. Chip Helm, who works for Cook Medical and is was a frequent visitor on campus to give a lot of sessions in our class. But due to COVID and for the way we are running these classes, he's agreed to talk to us through this medium. So Chip, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our students.
Thank you for having me.
Chip, tell us a little bit more about what does Cook Medical do?
Cook Medical is a privately owned company. It's in Bloomington, Indiana. We're global, so we're all across the world. Let's keep it simple, very much. We make medical devices, all different kinds of specialties, from cardiology to surgery to critical care to endoscopy to urology. The only thing that Cook is really not involved in medicine is probably orthopedic surgery. Outside that, we're probably involved in most things, but we're a medical device company, more wires, catheters, tubes that help critically ill patients in all areas of the hospital.
Fantastic. So if you try and take a look, who's your typical competition for Cook? You have so many broad portfolio of products.
I mean, we do. We're niche in a lot of different markets, but I'd say our biggest competitors are Medtronics, Bard, Boston Scientific. Those come to mind probably our largest, and Gore, probably our largest competitors.
So let me talk about your role within Cook Medical. How long have you been at Cook Medical, and what different roles have you done at Cook Medical?
Been around about 30 now. I'm in my 36th year.
Wow.
I've been in sales for 36 years because I believe everyone's in sales. But I started as a rep for critical care medicine. So I called them anesthesiologists, emergency room, general surgeons, ICU doctors, etc. Then I've been a product manager for Cook Surgical. We called it long time ago. I used to have a little card with my own name on it. It said Cook Surgical. So that was back in the heyday. I think I was the only person involved with the quote unquote Cook Surgical. Then I advanced up and was a national sales manager for this new SIS technology. It's this biologic type of mesh and grafts that are used throughout the body, and did that for the past 17 years. Then I was asked to come over and help build a government team.
Yeah.
And now I'm working on the government side of Cook Medical. And it's interesting because now I have a real better understanding of both the commercial side of medicine and supply chain and how things work, as well as now on the government side, because it's two different entities and two different beasts. I feel I have a really wealth of expertise now because a lot of companies will tell you, the Medtronics of the world, the Boston Scientifics of the world, the Bards of the world will tell you that their number one customer in the country, in the US, is the VA health system.
Yeah.
Largest health system in this country, and millions of dollars are bought from these companies. So the government's more important than I ever thought.
Indeed.
It's about the government for a long time.
Absolutely. And Chip, that's great, right? Because you actually had a wide set of roles in a career for 30 plus years.
Yeah, I've marketed things. As a privately owned company and been an employee of a private, I keep saying private because it's a lot different than a publicly traded company. Yeah. And so we wore a lot of hats. So I've developed products with physicians 30 years ago that are still now in the Cook system and are used in hospitals. And I was on the front line. I had every bit to do with it. The only thing I don't have to do with it is my name wasn't on the patent. Yeah. But everything else, though, I helped develop it. So yeah, we worked like that. We worked a lot of hats back in the heyday.
But you've also been a sales manager too, right? You also managed a team of salespeople as well.
And hired a lot of people, and unfortunately to fire some people. But yes, been in sales management. I was in there for 17 plus years.
Indeed. Now, tell me, so you have this broad portfolio of products, and I guess the government, that's typically what, for the students, what we call is that there's B2B, business to business, but this is B2G, right? Business to government. So tell us a little bit more from your experience of having worked with hospitals, with all the insurance companies that actually do all that kind of stuff to now working with governments. What's the difference in
Oh,
working with governments as against normal business to business?
government compared to the commercial side. I'll compare commercial versus government. Government, there's no reimbursement. There's no pricing discussions like there is. Everything's concerned about discounting in the private world, in the commercial world. Is how cheap can you provide, a medical device? In the government, there's no reimbursement issues. There's no pricing discussions because they decide on we decide as a company, and they decide to accept it, what price a medical device is. So once you're on contract inside the VA health system or the government, you're on contract. It's a good old boys club. They buy from who they like. You have to be on contract, and there's no discussions of pricing. There's no, if a clinician wants something, the supply chain gets involved and it can purchase it. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between the commercial side and the government side. I'll be honest with you, I think the government side is also nicer overall. The people are more welcoming. The people are more, it's just nice people to deal with. The commercial side, sometimes they don't care. Another thing is that I've learned a lot about the supply chain. You used to be able to go into hospitals and just sell and go up the sidewalk and go up the doors, go in and go up every avenue that you could find in a hospital setting and go find somebody. You can't do that anymore. And the supply chain really dominates the commercial side today. Even if a clinician wants something, doesn't mean they're going to get it, because the supply chain, when I say supply chain, I mean the purchasers. I mean the CEO of the hospital. I mean the CFO. I mean, it's all about money. And so it's a big difference between the government side. The government's not a profit center.
Yeah.
The commercial hospital is a profit center. So during COVID, the private sector had to get up and running quicker, because if they didn't have cases going on in the surgery arena, wherever, they weren't making money. The government side, it doesn't matter. They work 8 to 5. The train leaves around 4 o'clock. They get paid the same. Physicians can't make more than the president of the United States. So you have a better lifestyle working in the government system, a physician does, versus the commercial side. You have time with your family, and you're home every day at 5 o'clock. There's not much call. You don't work really on the weekends, etc.
I love this. So for the students, again, there are a couple of things. One was a term that Chip used, the term commercial. That is normally what we refer to as B2B. So if you want to go and sell to any hospital, that's a commercial. And a B2G is something. No, the other thing that Chip was also talking about was that when you go to a commercial hospital, remember, this is medical devices, so it's usually hospitals.
And pharma. I would wrap pharma in the same thing. Pharmaceutical and medical.
And medical, right? So you go in and typically you talk to the CEO of a hospital. Again, you would imagine that it's just doctors. No, there are CEOs out there who want to make sure that they run it professionally.
They call it the C suites. They call it C, as in Charlie Suites, is where these people hold out. They're hard to see them, to get them to see them, but they're the ones that have all the dollars and cents. What's going on with the money, and it's all about money. It's all about how much money they can save.
Indeed. Now, one of the things, Chip, that you mentioned, which I think I really like, is that typically in the class, the students we discuss the concept of the decision-making unit, which is what you said, right? So there's, in a hospital, there's the medical staff that is typically the doctors, the nurses, and all those kind of things, the orthopedic nurse, the hospital, the operating room nurses and stuff like that. So you have the medical staff, and then you have the non-medical staff, the CEO and everything else. Now, tell us a little bit more about the decision-making unit in a government situation. So you talked about the fact that, yes, there are doctors, yes, there are nurses in these VA hospitals, but do you get a chance to go talk to them? What power do they have, if any at all, in any decision-making done?
Well, it's funny you say that. In the commercial side, are calling on hospitals in the private sector, community hospitals or commercial side, they have no decision-making power anymore. Or they have very little, the doctors and the nurses.
Okay.
Fortunate, back in the heyday or years ago, they had all the decision-making. Right now, it's all built around the supply chain, the CSO, the CEOs, the CFOs, the higher-ups of a high organization. They're the ones that made the decision now on what's being used. Now, do they have a little bit of say? Yes, but nothing like they used to. Now, you go with the government side, the clinicians have a say. They have complete say because the supply chain wants to take care of their veterans. They want to take care of their active duty. So we're talking about VA hospital systems as well as the military hospitals. There's about 150 veteran VA hospitals across this country. And so they do have a say. If they want it and there's clinical buy-in and it sits on a contract, there's usually no problem on the road to get the products or get the devices or get whatever they want. I don't care if it's bedpans. Get it into the VA. Got to remember the VA has a government budget, and there's two methods in a VA hospital. You got prosthetics, which is not just limbs and arms and things replacing. Prosthetics is like for implants, devices that stay in the body more than 30 days. Logistics, and those are disposable items, wires, needles, things that just are used and are done. So they have two buckets to pay for money in a VA health system. You got prosthetics pays for implants, and you got logistics that pays for the disposable items. This big, huge, overarching government budget. So they have a budget every year that they have. So basically, that's how the money works. That's our taxpayer money. It is. So it's a totally different game.
Absolutely.
And to be honest with you, have you ever heard the word ASP? If you have salespeople, ASP is average selling price. Very important to know in the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry, because the VA hospitals probably have a higher average selling price than the commercial side. Why? Because most of the time they don't buy on discount, they buy on what's the most fairest price. It's usually you get near list price. Have you ever heard the word list before? List price is the top of the line of what a company charges their list. If something's $190, but then you have a discount, maybe for this hospital it's $120, whatever. But the list is key. Well, VAs basically pay list for the most part. Commercial hospitals, no way in God's green earth are they going to pay list. They want the cheapest discount you can give them. It's all about that. They could care less sometimes. Sorry, but they could care less sometimes about the quality over price. But that's where it's gone right now with physicians and their influence in the commercial side, which is minimum, to the influence that physicians have on the government side is very high.
Fantastic. Now, tell me about the sales process. There are two aspects there. So the first question I want to ask you is this. You talked about one, which is about disposables. And the other one is more about things that stay in the body for greater than 30 days, right? So I'm assuming that you're talking to two different sets of people within, because the disposables are much more something that you get thrown away. So once you get specified, it's just repeat order taking for the most part. Whereas if you try and take a look at the ones that are greater than 30 days, that's where you start talking about your innovations. You want to make sure that, so tell me, is the sales process the same even for within those two, even though you're talking to the government?
Yeah, I'd say overall it's the same process. And this may take longer process.
That's what I mean.
Process of the sales cycle may be longer. Why? Why would you say, why, Chip? Well, because what you're talking about is on the disposable side, it could be some commodity.
Yes.
Commodity could be something that everybody uses like Kleenex or something like that. That's one thing. If you have something that someone else doesn't have and it's niche-y and Cook only offers it, it still is less of a cycle because it's less costly, probably used more often. And so that's what I mean. But is it any different? No. On the other side, when you have implants, what's an implant mean? Something that stays in the body more than days. What's that mean to me? It means, say, it's probably highly technical. You got to really coach and teach a physician how to use it properly. If it stays in a body for longer than 30 days, it can hurt somebody or it can help somebody. You got to be very, very more careful. Usually those kind of devices are a lot more expensive. Those kind of devices sit on contracts. Those kind of devices are put under what we call consignment.
Yeah.
You ever heard that word consignment?
Stock, yeah.
Where you give them the product, they put it on the shelf, and as they use it, they pay for it. So consignment's big today in both the commercial side as well as in the government side. So, to go back to it, I think the sales process still go back to you buy from who you like, you still build those relationships. We have surgeons that use Gore or use Medtronics or use Boston Scientific, and I'll believe it in my heart the reason why they do, because they have a great relationship with that person. They're there all the time. They have their cell phone number. They're there for all their cases. So again, I believe that relationship building, that networking building, that ties in to the sales process. The only difference, in my opinion, would be maybe it's a longer sales process.
Indeed. And tell me
Still
about
would get to the end result the same way by building a relationship, building the trust, being there for them, but also you got to make sure you have a good device. And that brings up one last thing about this. On the disposable side, you can get away with an adequate, above average, a Me Too product for the most part. You can't on the implant side. You can't on the medical device that stays in a lot longer, because that's got to be precision.
Yeah.
It's got to be made correctly. It can't fail inside that patient. It's probably very expensive. And so that's why you have a lot of physicians who choose a Gore or a Cook or Medtronics, because that's what they were trained on. And so that's how they know, and they know how to use it right. So I'd say there's a difference. And I guess you could call it a difference of a sales process between.
Absolutely. And for the students, I think you should have paid attention to what Chip said. He said commodities. He talked about Me Too products. And essentially what you will see is that you will also see that typically the people who have power in those kind of things would be the logistics folks, because it's mostly about making sure that you're delivering it on time. There's enough to make sure you're dealing with it. That's why the sales process is still the same, but except that normally we call it repeat purchasing. So essentially it's something where they do repeatedly all the time once they know what it is. Now, the moment
I call it an annuity. If you know what an annuity is in the business world, it's something that just you get orders every week. And when that goes out and it's fluid and streamlined, and you usually don't have to go worry about it again, because you just see orders come in week to week or month to month.
Absolutely. And then essentially in our class, that's what we call transactional selling and functional selling. You'll even have things like e-commerce where you'll have EDI, and we'll talk about EDI in this class later on, where essentially the person in the customer's organization might just place an order online. Doesn't mean that they'll not talk to a sales rep, they will, but the idea is that they'll place because it's repeat purchasing all the time. Whereas the sales process is still the same, but when we talk about things that are more technical, there could be more people involved in making sure that the product is good. The product meets all the specifications. Is it safe? Can it be done? And essentially, that's why the sales process takes longer. And I'm sure that if you actually dig down, you'll see that you're even talking to different people in that process as against when we're talking about disposables. I love this. So let me ask you this.
So wait a minute. You said before you go on, you mentioned EDI.
Yeah.
It's happening all the time now.
Yeah.
On the government side, they go through what we call a prime vendor, a company that houses the medical devices. So they'll order through the prime vendor. The prime vendor will turn around and EDI it to Cook.
Yeah.
Electronically through the system. Will happen in seconds.
Yes.
But
That's
Cook will get it in seconds. Just like, so it's happening all the time. So EDI has become very much of a standard of living, our standard of care, our standard of delivering through the medical system. So there.
And it is perfect, because for the student, that's what you will be talking about, EDI and e-commerce soon. But this is where you need to understand is that this is where the theory that we talk about in class meets actual practice. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask you one last question, and it could be something that you want. Do you work with the concept of tenders, Chip? So essentially tenders where essentially they might say, okay, if you say you are going to be an approved vendor. So for example, I want to buy so much. You talked about Gore, Bard, you talk about Medtronic and stuff like that. So essentially what's going to happen is that there's going to be plenty of suppliers. So essentially, do you go through a request for proposal or a tender where we say for the next year, we want to shortlist certain number of suppliers to work with it. So tell me a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, well, we call it RFP.
RFP, right? Yeah.
That's for a proposal. RFPs are done all the time today in this world of medical and whatever. And what that means is that usually health system or, there's called Ascension. There's so many different health systems out there, but they come to the company and go, we request you to put together this proposal, RFP. Then they look at that proposal and they make a decision and they go back to their customers. All their customers that they have, they say, hey, look to us, is it 10%? Let's get the RFP. Nor do we, it says my internet connection's unstable, but hopefully you can hear me okay. But you're okay? Whatever.
Yeah,
but normally speaking, sometimes we get turned down. Sometimes the RFP does not go through. They don't accept it. They don't want us. Sometimes we don't even get the opportunity to have a proposal because they looked at the bulk of business and they said, well, Cook's got such a small percentage of business, we don't even want them to even be on our proposal. We don't want to go after Cook Medical. That's the problem. So that's why the Boston Scientifics and the Medtronics, unfortunately, there's such a large conglomerate of a company that they probably have a better opportunity, a better chance, and sometimes they have a broader portfolio. That comes up another thing. If you have a smaller portfolio and you have a broader portfolio, who's going to come to you?
Yeah.
Who's going to come to you and ask you for a specific price or a specific tender of offer of? They want the broadest portfolio they can get. That's what they're looking for. So if you got a broader portfolio, you're going to win. If also we call the word bundle. I don't know if you ever heard the word bundling.
Yeah.
They're very well known here in the States to bundle things. What does that mean? That means if you buy product A, I'll give you product B over here a little less. If you buy A and B and C, I'll throw in product D for you at hardly nothing. So they're used to bundling. That's not so much, it's illegal, but it's not really completely. They get around it, the legality of it, but they bundle things together. Say, I've got this big portfolio that you really want. You want it so badly, but I'm not going to give it to you
unless you buy,
unless you buy this over here too. So they bring it together as a bundle, and it's a good sales technique. It's a good sales process, a sales strategy. Bundling is huge in the industry. And since they're so big, they can bundle things probably even more effectively and efficiently than Cook Medical.
And I want to kind of add to what Chip was saying. This is just not true in the medical device. It's true in almost every industry, because from the viewpoint of a customer, working with multiple suppliers can become very expensive as well for a customer. So essentially, there is research now that shows that even generating a simple invoice could be between $100 to $150. So essentially, if I have to work with 4 different suppliers to even get the product, and if I can work with one supplier, so if I just work with one supplier where I can get everything, I have to generate one invoice. Whereas if I have to work with 4 different suppliers, so even from the viewpoint of costs for the customer, working with one supplier, that's why we take a look at one-stop shop. Why do you go shop at Walmart? Because you get everything in one place. You don't have to go in different places. There's an opportunity cost. So everything that Chip is saying, that I want you guys also to take a step back and understand the business dynamic of why, for example, if I'm a smaller player, but I'm going up against a bigger player in an RFP. So RFP, request for proposal, in different parts of the world, in different businesses, they call it a tender, T-E-N-D-E-R, like chicken tenders, right? So essentially, that's what it is, an RFP process. And Chip, do you, in the B2G space, in the business to government space, do you try to go influence the RFP process by trying to get your products specified in the listing so that when they write it up, it's automatic that you get called in for the tender? Do you try to influence it?
Well, okay, that's a big difference on the government side.
Yeah.
They don't have what's called tenders. What they do is they set it up where you submit your product line to them. They go through it and they look at it highest volume to lowest volume. So they'll look at their system and say, wow, do these products that Cook wants to submit on contract, are they being used at other VAs? So they start with the highest to the lowest. And that's how they work it. So it's not so much a tender because they have time frames, whatever you want to their contracts. It doesn't mean they have to accept it. And the problem is, I'll give you an example. There's some Cook items we don't submit to the VA contract. You're going to say, well, why don't you submit everything? Why? Because they look at the prices around the country. So they have access to what the commercial side is getting it for. They have access to see what all these other so let's say we have a very low priced item. It was our fault because we gave Hospital A a huge discount. Well, it'd be stupid for us to submit it to the VA because they would probably accept that or expect that. So we want to make sure that we clear up our pricing across our whole portfolio, make sure it's consistent across the whole United States.
Indeed.
So that when we submit to the VA and they look at other prices of our items, they say, okay, fair enough. You're giving us what we see everywhere else in the country. We're okay with it. That's why we don't submit some items, because sometimes we know it's so low that we wouldn't want the VA to accept that price. So we clean up internally. What companies do is they look at their whole portfolio, they go across all the lines, and then they reevaluate and they put together a very much more fair market value pricing, which is consistent across all of their portfolios. So then they can submit it more effectively for this sake to the government contracts. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think this is great. Hopefully we're achieving more in this class than normally if I just explain to them as a theory in class. I think it's great.
It's not, and that's the thing about it, what you need, you can end this segment on, I'm living it. We're living it every single day. We don't have someone on here going, well, 5 years ago, when I was in the business, no, this is what's going on. I'm telling everything we've talked about is actually going on today.
Indeed.
Currently, we're not talking about, something in the past.
Yeah.
We're talking about this is exactly what's happening right now on the commercial side and what's happening right now in the government side today, medical and pharma world.
Oh, but it's interesting that there's a lot of things happening here. So is Chip the only person doing this, or how many people does Chip have working with him in the B2G space from the Cook Medical side? I'm only talking about the sales side, Chip. So I'm not talking about your logistics side, your supply chain, but if you just take a look at salespeople in the B2G space for Cook Medical in the United States, how many people are working?
I don't know. I'm going to guess we're really consolidating. We're going back to the old days right now. A lot of our salespeople have larger territories now. Mm-hmm. That's what I did when 30 years ago. We had large territories. Yeah. Then we went to small territories and more people. Now we're back. It's kind of the pendulum has swung back to where you have larger areas. So, I'm sure we still have 300 plus salespeople out there.
Wow.
But you got to remember something. That's in different divisions. If you take all Absolutely. Of it, we have 7-8 different divisions of Cook Medical. So if you add all those people up, that's what I mean when I say 300.
But just for B2G, right? Just for government, for VA affairs and stuff.
Oh, no, just for government?
Yeah.
See, you have to understand something. The way our system works is the salespeople work both in the commercial and the VA.
Okay.
They have both. We don't have a separate sales team that just goes in. Now, we have a government team of executives like myself who help bring in all technologies into the VA, but the salespeople are the same salespeople on the commercial side, walk over and work in the VA side.
So it's great. So essentially, you're almost like key account managers, except that your key account is the government, and then you pull in the necessary
we're like
resources.
A key account manager. Yeah. We're not a salesperson per se.
Yeah.
Coordinating quarterback and bring in
quarterback
of all of Cook
Medical
with the help of the salespeople. But no, we don't have a separate sales team.
Yeah.
We do have a separate government team at a quarterback level or management level to help coordinate everything, connect all between the supply chain and the clinicians, bring them together, and so that you can bring everything in there and follow their rules of engagement and solidify your your business.
I think we'll wrap it at this point for the students. Essentially what you hear, and that's something we'll discuss in class in the future, is we're going to talk about key account management. We're going to talk about e-commerce, and essentially, but you heard from Chip how an organization like Cook Medical manages its go-to-market strategy, which is using its own salespeople. But even within its own salespeople, there are specific roles for different kind of customers, and government is one big segment of customers that you go after with the Chips and the executives of the world, who then have the kind of like a quarterback positioning where they work with the other reps, but then they are trying to consolidate everything. So essentially, Chip talked about multiple product lines. So if a government and if a VA, you need to start to bring all of them together. So Chip will make sure that he calls in the necessary salespeople in to get information from them to then present it to the customers. And similarly, you also need to have the supply chain side for Chip, because it's not about just making the sale, it's also about delivering on your promises. So that's why you'll see that key account managers are as much about selling as much as it is about quarterbacking, as much as it is about understanding supply chain, because you can only make promises, but if you're not delivering on your promises with your organization, you are going to make customers very unhappy. And in this case, you don't want to make the government unhappy, because you could lose big amounts of money if you get delisted from their approved vendor list. So
Right.
yeah, and Chip, thank you so much for your time again.
You're welcome.
And hopefully that the students, if they're going to be around for the next year, that there are going to be opportunities for them to actually meet you face to face as well.
That'd be great.
And for the students, Chip also has a couple of very interesting books. He's an author. I will provide you with the information about his books. And of course, for those of you in my sales technology class, stay tuned, because Chip is going to talk about how he uses technology in his day-to-day aspects of selling as well. So thank you again, Chip.
Thank you.